Right guys, today we're going to talk about how you can craft for a profit just using normal, regular crafting, no concentration this time. So contrary to popular belief in the gold making community, things aren't crafted at a loss in the vast majority of cases. So there are some niche occasions where this happens, but the majority of the time, things are getting crafted for a profit. But just remember, somebody else's crafting costs aren't necessarily the same as your crafting cost. In this video, I'm going to cover what knowledge setup you should be using, whatever profession you are doing, what you should be doing with your profession gear. We're then going to talk a bit about vertical integration, and then finally we're going to touch on sort of finishing Reagents and stuff like that to put on the end of our crafts. Then at the end, we'll just bring it all together a little bit. So we'll start by having a look at profession gear then. Now, profession gear gives you a lot of secondary stats. And to be crafting at a profit, you need the maximum amount of secondary stats from your profession gear as possible. So obviously this means you need rank 5 rare profession gear in a lot of cases, but not in every single case. Your profession tool should always have multicraft on it if multicraft works for whatever it is you are crafting. So you can tell this by when you have any multicraft on your character, and if it's not showing up in the crafting window, so therefore you have no chance of multicrafting, then multicraft is a useless stat for you then. If it's like that, then you don't use multicraft. But if you do have a chance to multicraft, then you are always going to use multicraft tool. If multicraft doesn't work for whatever it is you are crafting, then you need to use resourcefulness. Now this is very different when you're running a concentration build. In a concentration build, you will always run multicraft if that works, or ingenuity if it doesn't. Do not run resourcefulness on a concentration build. I've seen that advice going around. It is terrible advice. It is either multicraft if that works. If that doesn't work, then it's ingenuity. Now, as far as enchants go, there is no multicraft enchant. So you are going to use a resourcefulness enchant, whatever it is you are running on your crafting tool when you are being an active crafter. So when we are actually looking at the stats that we get off our profession gear, you think crafting speed, you know, it's okay, it's useful-ish, but it doesn't really affect the amount of profit you make, so it's not particularly useful. Ingenuity is nice for concentration builds, but when it comes to the actual part of active crafting, then ingenuity is actually useless for your bottom line. So you've got two stats there that don't really contribute to your profit margins. They do contribute in a little way in other ways, but they don't really contribute to your profit margins. And you also have situations, like we said, where multicraft will not contribute towards your profit margins. Multicraft is extreme. It is either BIS or it does absolutely nothing. So you could have a situation by which you have multicraft, crafting speed, and ingenuity that don't really contribute to the profitability of what you are doing as far as what your profit margin is concerned. Can help in your profit per hour, but it's not helping with your as far as your profit margin is concerned. Now, what this means, it means that you don't necessarily need rank 5 rare profession gear in every single slot. So unless you are trying to craft rank 3s and you need the plus skill, then the only benefit you are getting off your profession gear is the stats. And if the stats that it is giving you are no good for you, then you don't particularly need that piece of profession gear at sort of rank 5 rare. On the other side though, if it has any stats at all that are in some way helping you, so if it has resourcefulness on it, if it has multicraft on it, and that helps you, then that piece of profession gear has to be rank 5 rare to sort of compete in the market how it currently is. You need to be BIS, but you don't necessarily need the crafting speed and stuff like that, which you can get from elsewhere. So the TLDR with profession gear is multicraft tool with resourcefulness enchant if multicraft works. If it doesn't work, then it's a resourcefulness tool with a resourcefulness enchant. All your other profession gear that has any stat that contributes at all to your profit margins needs to be rare and rank 5 to make sure you are a BIS crafter. The other thing is, if your profession bag contributes in any way to what you are crafting, like for example, if you are unraveling, you need the unraveling tailored profession bag. Once again, it's only get it if it's something that's contributing to what you are doing. You don't just buy it for the sake of buying it, because there are a lot of them that don't really contribute. But like I said, it depends on what you are crafting to whether you need it or not. So as far as knowledge is concerned, it's sort of a similar situation to with the profession gear. If there is anything that gives you secondary stats that you need, then you absolutely must have it at this point in the expansion. Therefore, the most obvious areas of the knowledge tree that you do need to pick up are sort of the multi-craft and the resourcefulness sections that are on pretty much every profession. Now, obviously, if you're not using a multi-craft, then you don't need that, but you probably will be in the majority of cases. Now, you do have to be careful because there are nodes around sort of randomly scattered through the knowledge trees that give sort of bonuses to resourcefulness and multi-craft. So you need to keep an eye out for those because you need absolutely every single one at this point in the expansion. Now, besides the secondary stats that you are picking up in the knowledge tree, you do also need to, at this point in the expansion, be maxing out any buffs that your profession does give you. So I'm talking about things like potion spillover in alchemy. I'm talking about things like ever burning forge. I'm talking about things like supplementary shattering. Stuff like that absolutely needs to be maxed out now if you want to be competitive, because I can tell you, anyone you are competing against will have those maxed out as well. So you need to have them to have any chance of being profitable, and you need to be running those buffs whenever you are crafting. Now, obviously from the knowledge tree, if you are crafting rank 3s, then you do need to pick up the plus skill as well. But the most important thing is to make sure those crafting costs are as low as possible. So you need the multi-craft, resourcefulness, etc., and the buffs, and that's going to make you competitive. There's no point getting to a point where you can craft rank 3s, but it's not going to be profitable because you're not able to compete because you don't have the crafting secondary stats. So that is your priority. You need to do that first, and then you can worry about crafting the rank 3 stuff later on. At this point in the expansion, you should have absolutely every point of resourcefulness and multi-craft that you can get out of the knowledge tree, besides maybe alchemy that has a huge sort of knowledge requirement. But besides that, every other profession you should pretty much have that capped out now if you want to be able to compete with just regular crafting. So we'll talk a little bit about vertical integration because I think a lot of people are making mistakes here. Say I log into my inscription character and I open CraftSim and I see boundless ciphers are selling for 5 gold profit a craft, or maybe even a small loss, and you think, well, that's not worth crafting because there's no profit margin there whatsoever, which is fine because that's the information you are getting, but it's not really the truth. There is actually a decent profit margin to be had here, but you just need to take control of things a little bit more. Vertical integration is the process by which you take over sort of all the parts of the production process. Now, if you go onto CraftSim and you go to say boundless ciphers, then it's assuming that you're pretty much buying those off the auction house, and that's why your profit margins look like they suck. Because think of the journey that ink that you're going to use before it's got to that point in the auction house. So it started as a herb, someone's turned that herb into pigments and then maybe sold that on the auction house for a small profit, and then they've also paid the 5% auction house fee. Now someone has then bought those pigments, turned them into inks, sold them at a small profit and paid the 5% auction house fee. And every time this is happening, you're paying more and more onto it. Now, it may not be huge amounts, but it compounds the more you go through the crafting process. So I frequently see this where things are barely profitable or they're at a slight loss. But when you actually go back and you do the maths from the start and you're doing the whole process yourself, then you can actually make a decent bit of gold from it. Now, it's not amazing gold, but you can still craft at a profit by doing all parts of the production process yourself. And this is why it sometimes looks like that people are crafting these at a loss. They're not crafting them at a loss. They are crafting just in a different way to you and keeping their crafting costs as low as possible. So you can't really compete with that unless you are doing the same thing. Now, an issue here can be that you need different things to do different parts of the crafting process. So, for example, in the case of inscription, I need resourcefulness on my tool for milling because multi-craft doesn't work. So I need a resourcefulness tool with a resourcefulness enchant. And then when it comes to making the inks and the boundless ciphers, I need a multi-craft tool with resourcefulness enchant. So that is one of the problems of doing multiple parts of this yourself, that you may need two profession tools in order to be able to do either of them efficiently, because every stage you still need to be BIS. You can't do sort of a half-arsed milling and expect to compete, because at that point you may as well just buy the pigments off the auction house. It's just something you need to think about when you're talking about why am I not making profit from this. Is it because it's not profitable, or is it because you're paying too much for the materials that are going into it, and that's why your crafting costs are so high? You could look at it another way as well. So even something like disenchanting, you may think, oh, disenchanting and selling stuff on the auction house is not profitable. But if you are doing your own shuffling and your own crafting with all this stuff, then your material costs are going to be much lower, and then your crafting costs are going to be much lower. Now, I'm not saying that's 100% going to work, but it's better than paying somebody else a profit and paying someone else an auction house cut to get your materials and then say, oh, enchanting's not profitable because I can't just go there and buy stuff off the auction house. Now, in the case of disenchanting, I cannot guarantee that it's going to turn something that's not profitable into sort of thousands and thousands of gold of profit. But you can see how not paying somebody else their profit margin and not paying someone else a 5% auction house cut is going to make sort of a big difference to your crafting costs. Once again, if you want to set up that disenchanter, it needs to be a BIS disenchanter. It's no point having a half-assed disenchanter, because then at that point you may as well just be buying it off somebody else, because that's not going to bring the crafting costs down. So that's one thing that people need to take into consideration when they're thinking about why their crafting costs higher than somebody else's. Something else I think that not a lot of people are taking into consideration when they are doing the crafting is sort of the finishing and the optional reagents and all that sort of stuff. Now, the ones that give plus skill can be extremely useful if they are used correctly. Now, you may think that plus skill barely makes a difference, or things like the unraveled instructions and stuff like that. Now, this plus skill is making it so you can use that item and then trade some rank 3 materials for some rank 2 materials. And this, on some crafts, will barely make a difference. On other crafts, it can have a significant effect on the crafting costs. I've seen examples where this is literally making thousands of gold difference in the crafting costs. But these sort of things, it's very hard to say to you, it's good for this, it's bad for this, because the markets on these are changing all the time. So the price on like the unraveled instructions and stuff like that going up and down all the time. The price on the items and materials that go into them are going up and down all the time. So it's very difficult to say, oh, you need to use this for this, because it depends on a lot of factors. So you just have to sort of trial and error it yourself a little bit, I'm afraid, and see what works out. But if you are really, really struggling with something, then maybe have a look at those items that are giving you plus skill in your crafting. That might be the thing that you are missing, that your competitors are doing, that are making sort of it so they're making gold and you are not, because they're just using so many less rank 3 materials than you. The cost of the item they're using that's giving them plus skill is significantly lower than the amount in materials it's saving. Now, there are numerous other materials that you can put into your crafts that can make a significant difference to the crafting costs as well. Now, there are loads of these items across all the different professions. Some of these sort of increase multi-craft, increase the amount you get when you get multi-craft proc, all that sort of stuff. And once again, it's a situation whereby you have to try it out to see how effective it is for your crafts, because once again, the prices on everything is changing all the time. So sometimes it might be good, sometimes it might be bad. For some crafts it will work and for some it won't. But it's another thing you need to take into consideration when you are looking at crafting, because with certain crafts, especially expensive ones, it can make a significant difference to the price that you pay per unit. So overall then, just a few bits you can look at that maybe can help you turn a profit. But what I'll say is it is getting more and more competitive out there. So even with me doing all of this, I am even starting to struggle with profit margins now with all my BIS crafters, because so many people are getting to the stage now where they are BIS crafters that the competition is just ridiculous. And there's nothing that can be done about that. It's just the sheer amount of people that are in the market. So that is why still pushing everyone towards doing the concentration builds. Now, even the profit on the concentration builds is coming down as prices come down, but we knew that was going to happen. You know, they started at 100k profit every time you use your concentration, then it was 20k, then it was 10k, now it's sort of dropped even more. But if you want to be an active crafter over the course of the whole expansion, then I'm sure you'll make some good gold. But I think the majority of people just stick with those concentration builds. Once again, I'm going to put that playlist in the top left-hand corner, and that's what I suggest the majority of people do, because how competitive this normal crafting has got now, it's just crazy. And I think sort of few more weeks of this, and I think I might be stepping away from it myself as well and going back to what I do for my regular gold making from there. And that's not unusual. I tend to do this around this time in expansion. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Hope this potentially helps a few of you. See you next time.